The truth should come out, and people should be able to make their decision about what's going on based on, not the lies that the media tells. So I have with me now on the line Adam Levick. Is there? Adam, are you with me?
Hi. Yes, I am.
Hi, Adam. First of all, I know that you're very busy with a very small baby, your new baby.
Yes, I am.
And that is why originally I didn't have you on, because we didn't know if she would be crying. Is she quiet now?
She's actually quite calm, and she's in a good mood, and so we're both calm
good.
as well.
Cool. Okay, so you could put her on for her first radio interview. So thanks for filling in for Ben Dror. We'll figure out what's going on with him. New York is a tough place. It's hard to get a hold of people. But I was just telling my listeners about the importance of maybe tell everybody a little bit about Perspectiva. I'm familiar with it because I sit on the board, and I'm very proud to do so. But tell a little about Perspectiva, but then specifically what's going to be going on next week. A week from tonight.
Okay, well, Perspectiva monitors the Hebrew language media for inaccuracies, just like Camera and BBC Watch and SIF Watch and Camera on Campus monitors the Anglo media. So Perspectiva is just the Hebrew arm of Camera. It's the Israeli Amutah for Camera, and they just keep the Hebrew media. Keep tabs on the Hebrew media. It's no different than Camera, except it's done in Israel and for the Hebrew media.
So it might sound funny to some of the people listening. We're obviously speaking in English, and our audience is an English-speaking audience in Israel, but I would imagine mainly outside of Israel. And you might be used to, if you're sitting, you mentioned SIF Watch, which keeps an eye on some of the British, right, on The Guardian, yes?
Right. Guardian, and increasingly more of the British media beyond the Guardian. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I think people are kind of used to the fact that Israel doesn't necessarily get a fair shake, shall we say it that way, in the British media. And of course, complaints about the New York Times, Los Angeles Times. I'm from Los Angeles. I stopped reading Los Angeles Times a long time ago. But people might say, but what do you need some kind of watch group on the Israeli media? I mean, it's Israeli media and it's Israel. Obviously, they're going to not do things. They may not take a non-critical line. After all, we have a very free press here. We're very proud of that. The fact that we're a democracy and we have freedom of press and definitely freedom to criticize. But there is nobody needs a watchdog group to monitor a free press that's sometimes criticizing and sometimes praising. What goes on here, Adam, with the Israeli media that needs Perspectiva so badly?
Well, one example of what goes wrong with the Israeli media that's of concern and that motivates us to do what we do can be found during the Israeli media's coverage of Operation Protective Edge, when some of the voices in the Israeli media would kind of amplifies the message of delegitimization and demonization of Israel, and the foreign media, who's already inclined to advance that message, latches on to the fact that an Israeli media outlet says what they want to say as evidence that it's true. So there's this really unhealthy relationship very often between the foreign media, foreign Anglo media, and the Israeli media, and with the Israeli media serving almost like a cashier to the message that the foreign media, the anti-Israel foreign media, wants to tell about Israel. And it's a very serious problem, and it's something that we try to keep tabs on as much as possible. So that's in a nutshell one of the problems, and we saw that during the war, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I know anybody who's involved in any kind of Israel advocacy or media work or anything has been told more. I personally have been told more times than I care to count. But Haaretz, I saw it in an Israeli paper, and more than one person has said to me, I was pro-Israel. I was like, either way on Israel. I didn't have strong opinions for or against until I started reading Haaretz, and then I became anti-Israel. And here this is an Israeli newspaper. So
yeah. Well, first let me just be clear. The Perspectiva monitors all of the Israeli media, not just Haaretz. But I think it's safe to say that Haaretz plays a major role in what we do, because I think very often they give voice to the really marginal, extreme voices within Israel that really represent a small percentage of views in Israel. But it represents also the views of many far-left European and British and American journalists. So, like I said before, there's this, even though they're very marginal and their percentage of the Israeli media marketplace is very tiny, their voice is amplified because it serves a role. It serves to legitimize the message that the media wants to tell about Israel. So, even it does come from Israel. These are Israelis, and yet they're promoting a message that really hurts Israel in many respects, and that it tells a story that isn't true. It tells it repeats a narrative that many want to hear, but that's simply not accurate. And what we're about at Perspectiva and Camera is about accuracy in reporting, and so we hold them accountable as best we can.
So, you've mentioned a few times, and it's just so obvious that I think a lot of us don't even think about it, that the European or the outside news agencies are, they're promoting a line that's anti-Israel. But why does that have to be? We all just kind of take it for granted. No, I don't even know if you can answer this question, because this is almost a rhetorical question, that most of us take it almost for granted, and we're pleasantly surprised when there's an exception to the rule that most news agencies are going to be anti-Israel. So what Haaretz is doing here is, feeding into that and giving something that other people are looking for. And I keep coming back to this, but why are they looking for that? Why is it politically correct to be anti-Israel? I mean, Haaretz had this blatant cartoon last week, which I'd assume a lot of the listeners saw. And if you didn't, I'm really sorry to bring it up and cause you to maybe lose your lunch, of, an airplane with an Israeli, looking like Israel, right, with an Israeli flag, a Star of David on the side, being piloted by no less than the prime minister, flying into a very large office building, obviously made to look like the Twin Towers, with an American flag on it. Like, that Israel is destroying America or playing into conspiracy theories. It was just beyond, what do you guys do with something like that?
Well, obviously there's a free press here, and they're allowed
very
to
free.
say, and they're allowed to say or do anything they want, as long as they're not engaging in inaccuracy or saying something that's false and not true. But sometimes we will hold them accountable and point out how outrageous things they say are. In that case, I think it's a matter of playing into, again, the anti-Israel narrative that Israel is sabotaging the relationship with America. And again, as is typical of The Guardian and The Independent and oftentimes the New York Times, Haaretz's message is without nuance. You would think that the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, to the degree that it's problematic, that it's all Israel's fault. It just plays into that message. There's complete absence of any sort of nuance or just stepping outside and just taking a serious look at what the really serious problems are. Instead, it goes for the quick, easy, cheap shot at Israel, which I think is typical of unfortunately a lot of the coverage on Israel. So it's opportunistic. It was opportunistic, and it's hard to imagine. And the cartoonist, I think, responded. He said that he didn't realize how sensitive the issue of 9/11 was with Americans. And to be honest with you, I personally find that really hard to believe.
Yeah, really.
It's hard to imagine that he'd know that ahead of time. So again, they're allowed to print outrageous cartoons, but I think it's important for Israelis and for non-Israelis to support Israel and support accuracy in media to understand what that cartoon was about.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It was awful on every level, and as you said, so often things are presented about Israel without the proper context. So you can show a picture of like a rubble, right? Like a block of rubble. But really, and there are some people, and I interviewed some of the bloggers about this who did this, that if you pulled out the lens a little bit onto Gaza, you saw that it was like one block, and that's where all the terrorists were hiding. But you frame it like that, and it makes it look like Israel just turned everything into a parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I pay particular attention to the British media, and if you were to look at the war in Gaza, the Operation Protective Edge, and simply go by what the British media reported, you would truly can be forgiven for believing that Israeli soldiers intentionally kill not only Palestinians in Gaza, but Palestinian children. You would think that Israeli soldiers kill Palestinian children,
intentionally,
the message is,
right?
Yes, intentionally. Yeah. Because, especially if you're, like many news consumers, I'm sure, who are busy and they just leaf through the headlines and look at the images of destruction in Gaza and look at the headlines of Israel kills, and they don't read below the fold. And that's the image.
That's the impression that's left. And then Israel's a genocidal state. Adam, we've got to go out for a quick station identification. If you could stay with me, though, I'd really appreciate it. I'd like to talk about the conference that's coming up. Eve Harrow on The Voice of Israel. Don't go away.
معكم باسم عيد. أنتم تستمعون إلى صوت إسرائيل. You are listening to Voice of Israel.
Live from the heart of Israel, this is Voice of Israel.
Shalom, this is Rabbi Yitzchak Marmerstein from Beit Rav Kook in Jerusalem, and you're listening to Voice of Israel. Many blessings.
Hi, everybody. It's still November 2nd, 2014, although it's not anymore the 9th day of Cheshvan. Now we move into the 10th day of Cheshvan because it got dark. And the Jewish days start from dark to dark. Anyhow, from night to night. So I'm on the line with Adam. You still with me, Adam?
I am.
You are. The baby's being so quiet. That's so great. One of the fun things about trying to interview, I think I'll tell our audiences, about trying to interview you folks from Perspectiva is that in the evening, you're all busy with little children. I happen to think it's wonderful. No, it's really wonderful because there is such a nice there's such a nice mood when I come into the office on the occasions when I come in. You're all young, at least from where I'm sitting. You're all young. You're all so passionate about what you're doing, so intelligent, so invested in really getting the truth out there. It's not just a job for you, that is for sure. And I know I've watched you personally over the last few years, and get involved and take on the British media, which is not just a simple thing to do. So it's just, I hear her squealing back there.
Well, it's funny. I mean, also you mentioned. I mean, she's a month old now, and
great.
And she was. We were. You mentioned having a child, and it really does change things. I mean, during the war, when she was not quite yet born, but she was really close to being born. We were. It was during the Operation Protective Edge, and in Modin, just like in other cities in Israel, we dealt with a lot of Tseva Adom alerts. And there's something about having a Tseva Adom and having to rush for your shelter when you have a child or there's a child on the way that's just different than when you don't have a child.
Absolutely.
And it just makes it all more real. And obviously it's not hard to, you realize that you're in Israel, you realize what the risks are. But when you have a child, there's something about just the fact that Hamas rockets are heading your way and that your child's at risk. It makes it that much more
personal.
It makes our work. Yeah,
it makes it personal. Someone is trying to kill your child. That is how personal that it gets here in Israel. It really is.
And the truth is that the cognitive war against Israel, the media narrative that demonizes and delegitimizes Israel, really does affect the lives of Israeli citizens. I mean, it makes our lives more vulnerable.
Yeah.
The influence of the media, it can't be overstated. And we're professionals and we stick by the facts, and we only say what's true and we hold them accountable. But yeah, I think what you just mentioned about there being children running around the office. I think that's kind of important in the sense that I think we all come home and we look at our children and we remember why it is we do what we do and how important it is.
That's right. The boundary between home and work, not just because of cell phones and laptops, fades here when you live in Israel. Because when we go to war, which means like either our soldiers physically going to war, and I know that by the time that she grows up, we won't have that anymore, and she won't be bringing home the guys. She won't be serving in uniform. She won't have to anymore, please God. But either you're that war, or to a great degree, what some of us are fighting here is, like you said, is a cognitive war, is the battle for hearts and minds, which I don't think at this point is to some degree any less important, because the things that are printed in the media and the things that are talked about in the media help shape the opinion of people whose actions then absolutely affect our lives, and not just our lives here in Israel, but the lives of people in the West. Tremendous responsibility on being in the media, and no excuse for the lies and for the twisting. So let's talk about next Sunday night, November 9th at 7 p.m. There's going to be war by other means, Israel, Hamas, and media coverage of Gaza. So maybe in the few minutes remaining, tell us a little bit about what you expect, who's going to be speaking, and what you expect to come out of that evening next Sunday night here in Jerusalem.
Israeli author and columnist Ben Yamini will be speaking. Professor Richard Landis will be speaking. BBC Watch managing editor Hadar Selah will be speaking. There'll be Tamar Sternthal, who's the Israel director of camera, and there'll be senior researcher for Perspectiva, Gidon Shaviv, and it'll be moderated by Arnold Roth, who many people know, in case you don't, many people don't. He has this incredible blog that I look to every day called This Ongoing War, which is kind of like the go-to blog when it comes to covering the ongoing terror war against Israel by Palestinian terrorists. So it's going to be
he and his wife Frimet unfortunately became first row spectators, not spectators. They live it. They live it in their hearts and minds every single day because their own daughter was murdered at age 15 in the Sabaro's Pizza. 13 years ago, 12 years ago, when she was killed.
Yeah.
So so they totally understand that. And the terrorist was freed, and they follow that, and they keep us all updated. So he's a wonderful choice to have as a moderator. Tamar had an interesting little tweet thing going on. Can you talk about it with somebody from the New York Times?
Yeah, I forget how exactly it began, but at some point, Matt Seaton used to be, I think, a senior editor with The Guardian, and he has recently, I think maybe within the last year, he took a job with the New York Times, I think as an opinion editor. I could be wrong, but I think as an opinion editor. And he had a tweet about an article that appeared recently in the New York Times that was filled with errors that actually Camera was able to get a correction on. But it was a tweet. It was a tweet just basically saying that this article in the New York Times about Israeli racism was a breath of fresh air, implying as if it's unheard of for there being an op-ed in the New York Times about Israeli racism. And
that's funny.
Right. Like, they're truth tellers. They're very courageous. And Tamar Sternthal tweeted back, you have to see the context of the tweet, but, intentionally sarcastically saying, really, we had to go back a whole month to look at the last time that the New York Times published an op-ed about Israeli racism. And she also tweeted something to the effect, when are we going to hear an op-ed, when are we going to see an op-ed published in the New York Times about Palestinian racism? To which Matt Seaton, again, editor at the New York Times opinion section, replied, once they get a state, then we'll cover their racism, or something to that effect. So, there couldn't be a more perfect example of the bigotry of low expectations, where Palestinians are not held responsible for their actions, where Palestinian racism and incitement is simply not covered or hardly covered by the major media, including the New York Times and The Guardian. And so Tamar Sternthal wrote an op-ed that was published Times of Israel that's really gone viral, that, basically calling attention to this system, this pattern of the New York Times just obsessing over every Israeli sin, real and imagined, mostly imagined, and just not treating Palestinians like moral agents. And, if anybody's familiar with the essay at Tablet, the superb essay at Tablet by Maddie Friedman, one of the cardinal rules about the media coverage of Israel is that they don't take Palestinians seriously. They don't report on just bone-chilling racism, anti-Semitism, and incitement. And, maybe not only Maddie Friedman was correct, but maybe Matt Seaton just confirmed, what Maddie Friedman said, that they don't think that as long as they don't have the state, that they should be held responsible. That's truly remarkable tweet. And I'm glad that it got a lot of attention because it really deserved it.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that many of us knew, but here he actually put it in writing, and he wasn't ashamed to put it in writing either. Maybe he just figured we all knew it. That's another thing, if it's like this elephant in the room, but obviously it's not. They literally get away with murder, but I see actually that attitude towards, let's say, the Palestinian Arabs, even though it's an attitude that I find rife towards Arabs in general. I think that's racist. I think it's racist to not expect them to uphold the mores of truth-telling and honesty the way we would expect it from the rest of the world. What do you think about that? Do you think there's anything to that?
I think it depends on the individual person, but I think with some commentators it's motivated by racism, absolutely. But I think mostly, and maybe this ideology also is compromised by racism. But very often I think they accept this very facile not only David and Goliath narrative, but this narrative that people that are more powerful should be held to greater standards than people that are less powerful. This kind of, this powerful versus the weak narrative. And in their reasoning, because the Palestinians are the weaker party, that they can't be held responsible for their actions. So, yeah, I think to some degree it is racism. I think it's also ideology. I think it's ideology that they oftentimes they picked up in universities, and they've never kind of disabused themselves of it. I mean, I think there's a lot going on there, but yeah, I think racism is definitely an element of it.
Yeah, except that a lot of people wouldn't see it that way. But I think that everybody should be held accountable to the same standards. And that really the only way that we're ever going to have peace here in the Middle East, which is something that I desperately, and I've been working for a long time, and I know that you have as well, and I know that with that little bundle in your arms, as much as you were working for it before, it just went thousandfold to make sure that the world that she is raised in is a wonderful one and a peaceful one, where everybody gets to do what it is that they want to do to be fulfilling without hurting anybody else. And it's unfortunate that the media not only doesn't solve the problem, but in many degrees makes it worse. So I just want to give a little announcement for anybody who's listening and who has the good fortune to be in Jerusalem next Sunday night, Sunday, November 9th at 7 p.m. at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center. No one should be nervous about going there either after the shooting with Rabbi Yehuda Glick. A, they have tremendous security, and B, because you can't do that. Because if we are intimidated now from going to places and meeting people that we need to meet, learning what we need to learn, educating ourselves, then the world slowly becomes an even worse place than it was before. But that's in Jerusalem, 6 Nachon Street in Jerusalem. Where should they go? Where should people go, Adam? Should I give the website for people who want to register?
Yeah. If they can. If they go to the Camera Perspectiva website, they'll find information on it. But they can also. I can just give out an email address right now if they want to contact us directly, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. It's Elise, spelled ELYSE, at perspectiva.org.
Okay, that's PRESS. PECTIVA.org.il. Get it, everybody? Like press and Perspectiva. Yeah, it's cute little. Yeah, so it's perspectiva.org.il, at least at perspectiva.org.il to register for next Sunday night. War by other means, Israel, Hamas, and media coverage of Gaza. Very relevant because Gaza's still there, and the story is not yet over. Adam Levick, thank you so much for joining me tonight on The Voice of Israel. This is Eve Harrow, Rejuvenation. We're just halfway done this evening. We've got a wonderful interview coming up. Hopefully he'll answer his phone. We'll be right back. Stay with me.
You are listening to Voice of Israel, premier news talk from the heart of Jerusalem. To listen to more great audio, register for our live streaming broadcasts at voiceofisrael.com. Voice of Israel, bringing Israel